wealth of complex topics and ideas. That year was also the perfect time to learn about the hidden forces that govern the auto industry. The entire sector was in the process of blowing up as the 1-2 punch of an economic downturn and soaring gas prices collided with the industry's structural issues and individual automakers' cultural and strategic problems. Diagnosing the ills that had led up to the bankruptcy and bailout of GM and Chrysler, and analyzing their subsequent public open-heart surgeries, was an object lesson in the brutal realities of a uniquely capital-intensive yet low-margin business. The allure of cars themselves is what typically brings people into the auto industry's orbit. But in my case, it was the complex system of people and ideas that make and define cars that sucked me in. I threw myself into a process of intense self-education, reading everything I could find about cars and the auto business, and synthesizing what I learned into blog posts. In my first year on the job, I became TTAC's managing editor. In my second year, I became its editor-in-chief. And by the start of my third year, I had been asked to contribute an op-ed to the New York Times. The subject that I never would have picked as a lifelong obsession was turning into a career that I never could have planned. Over the course of the last 11 years, I've been lucky enough to share my ongoing self-education with the readers of the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg View, the Daily Beast, Automotive News, and others. Having started my career by casting a critical eye on the bailout of GM and Chrysler, I've always gravitated toward perspectives that cut against the grain of conventional wisdom and reveal the hidden stories that must be dug out and dragged into the light. Compared to the intense debates and bitter animosity that surrounded the collapse and bailout of Detroit, which was both my and TTAC's main focus at the time, my earliest exposures to Tesla seemed downright tame. With the entire auto industry in flames, a tiny California startup that converted imported British sports cars to electric drive was hardly worth getting worked up over. With the benefit of hindsight, however, it is possible to see that even in 2008, perspectives on the company were already beginning to diverge. At a time when a whole crop of electric car startups were peddling either vaporware or glorified Chinese golf carts, Tesla distinguished itself from the crowd by attacking the high end of the market with an electric sports car. Reports of the Tesla Roadster's face-melting acceleration and popularity with green-conscious California celebrities suggested that this was one electric vehicle, EV startup that at least had the potential to be something more than a flash in the pan. At the same time, the company's situation was fraught. It was burning through cash. Critical components needed re-engineering. Its founders were starting to feud, and the funding it would need to survive was drying out as the downturn took hold. Just like Tesla today, the Tesla of 2008 was a volatile mix of enormous long-term potential with intense short-term challenges. As Tesla began to actually deliver a trickle of cars during 2008, which was more than most EV startups could claim at the time, TTAC began to document the company's struggles in a brief series of blog posts labeled the Tesla Death Watch. Though it would later gain far more attention, the Tesla series was barely an afterthought to the GM, Chrysler, and Ford Death Watches that had built the TTAC brand in the years before I arrived. We hadn't added a Tesla Death Watch to our coverage out of any special animosity. In fact, when I took over the site in 2009, I discontinued all of the Death Watch series because I was concerned the inflammatory name might make readers think we were rooting for the subject companies to fail, rather than documenting the challenging nature of the industry. The Tesla Death Watch was simply an interesting story that illustrated just how brutally tough it was for new automakers to survive, as well as a refreshing break from the Detroit Death Watches. After less than a year of sporadic Tesla coverage, during which we missed several opportunities to dig into stories that were a lot more interesting than we realized at the time, TTAC's founder canceled the Tesla Death Watch on the occasion of Tesla's 100th Roadster delivery. Over the next 5 years, I watched with bemusement and a little surprise.